as it is, I've suddenly become a single mom. I'm the one that works outside of the home. I don't have sitters for my 2 little ones, so I've had to scramble to find sitters. Scramble to make sure that Matt had somebody at the hospital with him every day. I was trying to correlate with like 4 or 5 different people's schedules to make sure we had somebody for the 2 little girls. And I was doing it, but it was very hard. It was very stressful. And of course, during this time, I'm trying to text and call his family, especially his mom. I wanted to make sure that she verbally heard everything from me. And then I was just doing text updates and just trying to keep everybody updated on what was going on. All that took place in the first 7 days. It was some of the longest 7 days I think of my life. And then the morning of the 8th day, the doctor called me, and I thought it was so odd I was getting a call at 9 o'clock in the morning, because I had never gotten a call that early. It was usually closer to 11:30. And so my heart almost stopped when I saw that it was the hospital calling. And he introduced himself, and he says, "It's that time." He says, "We need to put him on the ventilator. Things are not going well, and we can't keep his oxygen up." And so after he explained everything through to me and everything, I asked if he could give us 10-15 minutes to call him and talk to him before this happened, just because I needed to verify a couple things before he was unresponsive. And so he says, like, yeah, that's fine. I got a couple other people to see, and I'll circle back around, but we need to do this ASAP. So I'm like, okay. So immediately I called Matt. We video chatted. I had to, on his electronic devices, he's got all the information I need for paying bills, or whatever the case may be, like financial type stuff, the important stuff that kind of keeps a household going. And so I needed to make sure that I could have access to all that stuff. And so he did it, and we were told that it was a very high chance that it was going to be at least 2 weeks on the ventilator. Now, for some of you that are not aware, the respirator, the ventilator, life support, it's all the same thing. So they're all interchangeable. It's just whatever that nurse, the doctor, that hospital, whatever term they want to use. So I've never had to deal with a family member, or up until this point in time, in this situation. So now back to you, Matt. So now you're being told you need to go on the ventilator.
I don't remember.
You don't remember that at all. So you were pretty well gone at this point in time. So you don't remember talking to me a little bit?
No.
I mean, you had to open up your electronics so that they didn't block me out, so I could get that. Do you remember doing that?
No.
No. Okay. So he's pretty well gone. So he's not going to remember anything for a while. So on day 8, they went ahead and intubated him, and he was, we told each other, I basically told him good night, have a good sleep, good rest, enjoy the 2 weeks sleeping, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. And he was just like, okay, and he was then, moved to the ICU when he was intubated and everything, and I went up to see him, and that was one of the hardest times that, to see a person, seeing them in a very vulnerable state like that is very hard to see. I lost it. I was an emotional wreck at that point in time. And the nurse, even through all these COVID measures, this hospital was wonderful to me. The nurse came over, she had her arm around me, and she was just like, rubbing my shoulder, and she's like, it's going to be okay. She's like, I'm with a lot of people, and this is going to be okay. And it was just really sweet that she did that. The doctor came in before I left that day, and he was across the bed from me, and he just, he kind of got down on the edge of the bed, and he's like, he's going to make it. But this is going to be a long, hard recovery, but he's going to pull through. The surety in his tone and the look in his eyes, I knew he meant what he said. There was just something about that. And from that point on, that was pretty much the doctor that I had saw through this period of time. He would call me from home. There was one time he even called me from his car to update me because he hadn't updated me for a couple days. And I had been up there every day. Now, every day that I saw Matt while he was intubated, I would go in, and I'm going to tell you guys this because I feel that it made a big difference. And the nurses also said that they feel that it made a big difference. But I would go in. I just immediately would grab his hand and just hold his hand. I mean, it was really hard because he had a lot of IVs and stuff. His fingertips more than anything. And I would tell him the date. I would tell him the weather. And then I had each of the little girls pick a Christmas song because it was before Christmas. And I would play that song for him. And then I would just go on and talk to him. Oh, this is what's happened since I've last been in. Whether it was the day before or whatever. And that's what I did every single day that I went in there. And some days, there's a couple days I was there for like a half hour. Otherwise, it was a good average of about an hour and a half to 2 hours every time I went in. But after that night that the doctor reassured me that he was going to do fine, I came home and my two little girls were just a mess, especially the older of the two little girls, number 5. And she's just like crying and crying and crying. She's like, Daddy's going to die, isn't he? And she was just having a real hard time. And I had this peace come across, just come over me as I was talking to her and said, you know what? Daddy's going to pull through. God is not ready to take him home yet. And when he does, we have to accept that. Whenever that may be. But today is not that day. And something about that point in time, after what the doctor said, and then just that peace that just came over me. It's hard to even explain that. But I knew then, from that point on, I don't think I had an emotional breakdown after that. I don't think I did.
I don't remember.
Well, why not? And so it just, every day, even if I wasn't up there, the nurses would call me when he was in the ICU and just give me, a quick update on how the day went. And I would double check on all his numbers. I had access to his My Chart because he was able to open it up so I could double check things in case they didn't call me, or that way I could ask questions. And so I was watching his numbers on that. After about day 3, I believe it was, in the ICU, he is also diabetic. So that played a lot in the whole ICU area. And his insulin was just extremely high. Because you have a sedative, you have a paralytic, and then you have all these pain meds and, blood thinners because of the blood clots. Steroids. All kinds of stuff. I think, if I remember correctly, you had 7 pumps going of different meds. Plus, one of those was also your nutrition. And so, yes, I double checked what all of them meant. I'm just really into that stuff. And so by day 3 though, day 2, they told me they were going to, if something didn't change overnight, then day 3, they were going to have to do something else. And so what they ended up doing is they were giving him 2 insulin drips. So there was a long-term drip, and then there was a short-term drip. So one was getting in there faster and one was lasting a lot longer. And once they did that, the insulin became more controlled after about 36 hours, I believe it was. It became to a normal controllable level, and then miraculously, all the other meds were starting to do their job. It was starting to show. And the one nurse at that point in time, he had mentioned, if we can get this under control, this is a common thing. When, if we can get the insulin under control, then we can usually get the other meds under control. Not always can they get the insulin under control though. So in this case, it did work. Everything else started working. Numbers were starting to improve daily. And after 7 days of being intubated, they were finally able to wake him up. Actually, day 6, they were starting to wean him down just a little bit. But as of day 7, he was totally off everything. And it was nice to see him. I mean, with his eyes open. It was wonderful. What did you feel like when you first woke up? Were you really confused? You think? Do you remember?
I don't really remember. When I do, I don't know when I started really remembering, because I only remember bits and pieces for the first few days. Mm-hmm. But I was confused what I remember.
Okay. So that was 7 days then, and then he was probably, I think, still in the ICU for about, it was 3 days, I think it was. My timeline here is going crazy. So, like 3 days after he was woken up, they took him to a regular room, and they still had to really watch some things. His body was really having bad withdrawals from all the medications and stuff, and they were really trying to back him off on that, but he was having some withdrawal symptoms, so they really had to get that under control. And so then he was into a regular room again for about 5 days. Do you remember any of those days? Those went by really quickly for me. I think our oldest was able to be there for 3 of those 5 days. So for me, that went really quickly because it was mostly the weekend, and that's usually when I took a couple days off just to try to get things done here.
I don't recall a lot of that. I don't. I remember at one point when I was in the regular room, I got her to sneak in a slushie.
Oh, and then you got in trouble.
Yeah.
That was that was like the last day, I think it was, or 2 days, second to last day. Yeah, so our oldest brought him a slushie. He got in trouble for having that in there because he's diabetic and he shouldn't have that. But he was awake and aware enough that he was starting to feel a little bit more himself at that point. And then they were able to transfer him closer to where we are staying now, which is an hour drive, and to a rehabilitation hospital, and that's where he spent the next 2 weeks. So it was right about 15 days then. He was in the rehabilitation hospital, and he improved daily. It was amazing. Every day I could see movement more and more and more, and I wasn't there a lot for that. I would go in the evenings after I would get home from work and just, hi, how did the day go? Spend an hour or 2 with him, and that was about all I could do. And I actually wasn't at the rehab hospital very many days.